officially done as yet. Right. Looks like twins shaking hands with both the same cardigan on. Anyway, they won't be wearing those next time because next time is the next show. Yes, we'll be doing the first game in a set of 3 in the beginning of the next edition of Blockbusters. We hope you'll be joining us then. For now then, from all of us here, goodbye, good luck, see you then. Bye.
This Sunday at 7:15, Catchphrase, the latest in television technology from Television South. Roy Walker keeps the score while contestants take on a comic computer to win fabulous prizes. Catchphrase, Sunday 7:15 from Television South.
1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4. 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. Pat a cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. Hot cross buns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. Peas pudding hot, peas pudding cold. Half a pound of tuppenny rice, half a pound of treacle. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing.
Cook, cookability, that's the beauty of gas.
Can you draw a face and get the features in proportion to each other? Or a tree and get the rest of the landscape into perspective? This viewing grid will help, and it's free with Part 1 of Drawing Course. Week by week, with practical advice from professional artists, Drawing Course will help you to improve your sketching by learning the secrets of the world famous. Drawing Course starts this week. Make sure you get Part 1 and start learning how to draw like a professional.
You're almost ready, Diane. How about a coffee?
You've changed brands.
It's probably Nescafé in another jar.
It can't be. Nescafé don't make coffee for anyone else. Only Nescafé has that special blend and roast for that richer, smoother taste.
Nescafé coming up.
Well?
That's the Nescafé taste. It's the one for my customers.
Oh, good. Hairdresser with fringe benefits.
Nescafé don't make coffee for anyone else.
I always like my crisps to have that just cooked taste. That's why I insist on Walker's crisps. And that's why, when I reach the end of one packet, I always like my crisps to have that just cooked taste.
Don't you insist on Walker's crisps time and time again?
Now is the time to capture the allure of Harrod's sail.
A runny nose can be a right misery. But with Dimetap, you can turn off a runny nose for up to 12 hours. Worldwide, Dimetap has been the chosen treatment for runny nose and congestion over 200 million times. Nowadays, you can get Dimetap from your chemist without prescription. Dimetap turns off a runny nose.
Speak to us, Sydney. Are you there, Sydney? Are you there, Sydney? Sydney?
Somebody somewhere is having a Toffee Crisp.
Tired eyes.
Refreshing.
Gritty eyes.
Soothing.
Smoky eyes.
Optrex. What a sight for sore eyes.
You're watching Television South this Thursday evening. In 15 minutes, all the regional news and events in Coast to Coast. First, the news from ITN.
The news at 5:45 with Martin Lewis.
Michael Heseltine attacks the Prime Minister and resigns from the Cabinet. But if the basis of trust between the Prime Minister and her Defence Secretary no longer exists, there is no place for me with honour in such a cabinet.
From the Prime Minister, I regret you were alone in being unable to accept a cabinet decision. Mr. George Younger is the new Defence Secretary. Good evening. The Defence Secretary, Mr. Michael Heseltine, has resigned after a sensational cabinet walkout over the Westland helicopters affair. He wouldn't accept that all statements he made about Westland should be vetted by the Cabinet Office. 2 hours ago, Mr. Heseltine launched a stinging attack on the Prime Minister. He said she'd tried to stop discussion on the European rescue offer for Westland. And he also claimed his objections were kept out of Cabinet minutes. He said the line taken by Mrs. Thatcher was materially misleading, and it wasn't a proper way to run a government. Tonight, Mrs. Thatcher said she was sorry about his decision to quit. She said in a letter it was a matter for regret that he alone was unable to accept the Cabinet ruling. The new man at Defence is George Younger, former Scottish Secretary.
When he left home early this morning, Michael Heseltine didn't seem like a man on the brink of resignation. In fact, he looked and sounded as if he believed the battle over Westland was moving his way.
Confident they'll make the right choice?
I think the future will unfold. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
An hour later, the First Ministers started arriving at number 10 for the Cabinet. Few were expecting a major row over Westland. All the signs were both sides were cooling down, and many Cabinet Ministers expected a bigger fight on rates reform. Leon Britton, the Industry Secretary, had already protested several times to Mrs. Thatcher about the Defence Secretary's vigorous campaigning. Just 1 minute before the Cabinet was due to start, Heseltine's Jaguar shot into Downing Street, and he went quickly into number 10. There was 10 minutes of routine Cabinet business before the discussion on Westland started. Mr. Britton gave a brief factual report on events over the Christmas recess. Then, over the next 3/4 of an hour, the Prime Minister and her Defence Secretary, sitting opposite each other, conducted an extraordinary argument. Mrs. Thatcher insisted that all ministers must abide by the Cabinet decision to leave the decision to Westland. Mr. Heseltine said he accepted collective responsibility, but there had been no proper Cabinet discussion on the future of the company. In a clear effort to silence Mr. Heseltine, the Prime Minister proposed that all statements by government ministers should be cleared through the Cabinet Office. Mr. Britton accepted that at once, and Mr. Heseltine did too, but he said he must be free to restate what he'd already said. Otherwise, he would look as if he didn't know his facts. The Prime Minister insisted that all his future statements should be cleared. Norman Tebbit tried to peacemake, so did Tom King, but neither Mrs. Thatcher nor Mr. Heseltine would give way. Suddenly, to the stunned surprise of his Cabinet colleagues, Mr. Heseltine stood up, gathered his papers, said, "I can't accept that," and left the Cabinet table. As he stalked out of the Cabinet room, Mrs. Thatcher said she was sorry he was going. A Cabinet Minister said later it was like a Greek tragedy. It's unprecedented for a Cabinet Minister to resign by storming out of an actual Cabinet meeting. And late this afternoon, Mr. Heseltine, still in the Ministry of Defence but no longer the Defence Secretary, called a press conference to explain his actions.
The Prime Minister properly summed up the view of Cabinet that all answers should be referred for collective clearance. I could not accept that constraint in the critical few days before the Westland shareholders decide. I had no choice but to accept or to resign. I left the Cabinet. If the basis of trust between the Prime Minister and her Defence Secretary no longer exists, there is no place for me with honour in such a Cabinet. There is no way, as I was then Secretary of State for Defence, that I can be expected not to stand by public commitments that I have made and which I was authorised to make in the conduct of my duties.
The Conservative chairman, Norman Tebbit, denied that there had been any attempt to gag Mr. Heseltine.
No, not at all. And this is the curious thing that we all agreed that the decision of the Cabinet should stand, that the company should not be pushed around by government, that it should make its decision, not least in the interest of the company itself, its employees above all, I think, really, and that we should not intervene in that decision. Now, that was acceptable to everybody, including Michael, And we then discussed just the mechanism by which we made sure that at a particularly sensitive time for the markets, for, the shareholders and people of that kind, that all the answers which were given by all ministers should be absolutely in line.
All I want to say is that I greatly regret the fact that he has felt necessary to resign, and I don't think I ought to add anything more than that. I'm very sorry that he's felt that necessary.
Do you view it as a... Mrs. Thatcher has been under a lot of pressure from dismayed Tories to end the damaging row over Westland. She came to the Cabinet this morning determined to put a stop to Mr. Heseltine's vigorous and highly public campaigning. Well, she succeeded, but only at the cost of giving potentially her most dangerous opponent the freedom to criticise from the back benches. David Rose, ITN, Westminster.
Opposition politicians expressed surprise over Mr. Heseltine's resignation. The Labour leader, Mr. Kinnock, said it was now essential for Mrs. Thatcher to make a full statement to the Commons. The Liberal leader, Mr. Steele, said Mr. Heseltine was right to pursue a European option, but wrong to leave it so late. And Labour's defence spokesman spoke about the effect on Westland shareholders.
Many of the shareholders might feel that Mr. Heseltine has left them down. I mean, you played a film about people running away. Well, Mr. Heseltine has to some extent run away. He has not stayed to the end and fought his corner. But having said that, I hope now that on Tuesday there will be a postponement of that meeting so that both bids, both offers, can be put in a rational, calm way. We can get away from this crazy theatricals and dramatics we have had over the last few months.
The nub of this issue is the way the Prime Minister conducts the government. And what Mr. Heseltine is challenging is the Prime Minister's autocratic methods, her unconstitutional handling of the Cabinet, her refusal to accept that we do not have presidential government in this country. He is standing out against her whole style of government.
It all began back in May here in Yeovil, the home of Britain's only helicopter manufacturer, workplace of just 7,000 people. Although technically world leaders, Westlands were running out of money. A takeover bid from helicopter operator Alan Bristow was withdrawn when he saw the books, and in deep trouble the company went to the government for help. They were turned down and told to look overseas for a partner. And along came the American Sikorsky, who wanted an entry into Europe and saw the Westland name as the way to get it. It wasn't until just before Christmas that the Europeans showed up with their competing bid, strongly backed by Mr. Heseltine. But Westland's chairman, Sir John Cuckney, would have none of it. He was firmly wedded to the Americans, however much pressure Mr. Heseltine was putting on him. But the Europeans weren't finished, launching their own improved offer just a week before the vital shareholders' meeting. And out to every shareholder it went last night in an attempt to get the American deal rejected. Today, the Americans were in the City of London lobbying institutional shareholders and diplomatically saying nothing about Mr. Heseltine's resignation.
I have absolutely no comment. Sorry about that.
But the Europeans seem to think it wouldn't make much difference.
I think it's terribly difficult to say what's going to happen as a result of this resignation. What we hope very much is that the shareholders will now consider our proposals, which we sent out to them yesterday, and will make their judgment on the basis of the financial and commercial reasons and not for political reasons.
Back in Yeovil, the workers seemed pleased.
Good news.
Best news I've had all day. Well, I should imagine the Sikorsky deal will get a lot more support now, won't it?
As they began collecting the proxy votes tonight, ready for Tuesday's crucial meeting, most shareholders realised they were voting as much in valedictory judgment on Mr. Heseltine as on the future of the British helicopter industry.
Mr. Heseltine has refused to comment on where his political career goes from here. He's been a minister under both Mr. Heath and Mrs. Thatcher, and he's always had the reputation of speaking out for what he believes in.
Described variously as a rebel, a loner, the richest man in the cabinet, and the most ambitious, but also as the most compassionate. One thing's sure, he doesn't get on with Mrs. Thatcher.
My impression would be that he's been kicking up for some time. I think he does not like Mrs. Thatcher's style of leadership.
An MP for 20 years, he's been on the front bench for 17 of them, gaining a reputation as a minister who got things done. It didn't quite go with the nickname Tarzan dubbed on him in 1976, after he'd picked up the mace and swung it round his head in anger at Labour MPs singing the red flag in the Commons chamber. But he was getting a name for himself too, as the darling of the Tory conference and the scourge of socialism.
The reality lay in Blackpool last week, a one-legged army limping away from the storm they had created. Left, 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 left.
In Mrs. Thatcher's government, he got 2 jobs he didn't want. First, environment, where he cracked down on council spending, but showed deep concern for the inner cities and their problems. Then defence, where he took on CND, forced some economies on the service chiefs, and eventually became embroiled in the Westland fight. There are those who think his recent activity has all been part of a long-term plan.
I think that he may possibly have calculated that he's never going to get a helping hand from Mrs. Thatcher. I think he would have liked to have been chairman of the party. He certainly would have liked to have held the job that Mr. Britton holds and have been Secretary of State for Trade and Industry. I think he knows that she'll never make him, or would never have made him Foreign Secretary or Chancellor or anything like that. So maybe, he said, this is the time when I have to make my bid.
The new Defence Secretary, Mr. Younger, says he's surprised and sad that Mr. Heseltine has gone, but he won't be taking up Mr. Heseltine's public stand on Westland.
I am very happy to take the general government line on this matter, which is that it is now up to the shareholders of Westlands to decide between these 2 offers and any others that came up. It's their decision, not the government's.
So there won't be any more of the campaigning that Mr. Heseltine was indulging in?
There will be no campaigning in either direction by any part of the government. The government view is quite clear.
Other news now. A woman who drowned her 8-year-old son while on probation for killing her other 2 sons has been sent to a mental hospital indefinitely. Sandra Riley from Macclesfield admitted manslaughter with diminished responsibility. The court heard that little Andrew Riley was taken off a Social Security risk register just months before he died.
Andrew Riley fought for his life as his mother tried to drown him in the bath, the court was told. "Don't kill me, Mummy," he pleaded, but she did. And it was the 3rd son Sandra Riley had killed in her home on the housing estate in Macclesfield. The same Chester Crown Court had, in 1983, placed her on probation for killing her babies Christopher, aged 5 weeks, and later Philip, just 2 months old. She was, psychiatrists said then, suffering postnatal depression. Her husband, Brian, forgave her. But grandmother Lillian Riley was not happy.
She's not mental, she's just evil. And I've said it to more than you, I'll say it again. If she's let free and the mood comes on her, she'll take a child off the street, and I firmly believe that.
Andrew was watched at school and visited often, but taken off the risk register 4 months before he died. The judge today said there was concern that Mrs. Riley had the opportunity to kill again. So what went wrong?
There weren't any indications, in fact, that this was going to happen. In fact, right up towards the end, all the evidence, not just from the social worker, because a whole range of people were involved in this case, not just my social worker, all the evidence was from the various people concerned that, if anything, the relationship with Andrew was improving as far as the mother was concerned.
There's no suggestion of a witch hunt here, no suggestion that anyone in particular has failed to do their job properly. But everyone accepts that something went wrong somewhere, otherwise Andrew Riley would still be alive. Vernon Mann, ITN, Chester.
Police with submachine guns have gone on patrol at Heathrow Airport, the first time they've been used for routine protection in Britain. The move comes after the terrorist attacks on Rome and Vienna airports a fortnight ago. Similar protection will be extended to Manchester Airport from next week. Show business personalities mourned comedian Dustin Gee today at his funeral in Yorkshire.
As Dustin Gee's coffin was carried into the church where he was christened, his stage partner Les Dennis joined the family mourners and comforted his mother. And among friends from the world of show business, a tribute to the comedy duo's favourite routine, Coronation Street stars Thelma Barlow, who plays Mavis Riley, and Liz Dawn. It was her character Vera Duckworth that Dustin Gee impersonated to her great delight.
Birthday, yeah. I thought I could do me better than Vera, better than me. It was fantastic.
In his address, the vicar paid tribute to Dustin Gee's talent and popularity among show business colleagues and his loyalty to friends he'd made before he found fame. Many of them listened to the service on loudspeakers outside the church. After the service, there was a private cremation ceremony. Anne Lucas, ITN, York.
In London, the rock world gathered to pay its tribute to Thin Lizzy singer Phil Lynott, who died at the weekend. His widow Caroline, daughter of TV presenter Leslie Crowther, led the mourners at a requiem mass. Band-Aid founder Bob Geldof came to pay his respects. The singer died from heart failure 11 days after being admitted to a drug addiction clinic. Owners of Kodak instant cameras in Britain will be able to swap them for other Kodak products after they were banned by a judge in America yesterday. About 1 million people here have one. They'll be able to go on buying films until the stocks run out in a few months' time. The American ruling came at the end of a 10-year legal battle by the rival firm Polaroid. The courts agreed that Kodak had infringed Polaroid's design patents.
For once in photography, Kodak had not led the field. Their range of instant cameras, launched 10 years ago, designed to make a hole in a $1 billion a year market dominated by their rivals Polaroid since 1948. At once, Polaroid sued Kodak, claiming that the newcomers had infringed some of the many complex patents which surround their cameras and instant films.
Claiming that what Kodak had done was hire away some former Polaroid employees and get Polaroid's technology.
But today, Kodak conceded defeat. The legal battle never finally resolved. The cameras and films were being removed from shops all over the country. Existing owners will be made a special offer. They can exchange it for an ordinary Kodak camera, a coupon worth $50, or 1 share of Kodak stock. But the picture is less clear for Kodak themselves, who could face a $1 billion claim for damages from Polaroid. Another reason why Kodak are getting out of this particular business instantly. Ken Reese, ITN, Washington.
And that's the news tonight, the day that the Defence Secretary, Mr. Michael Heseltine, resigned over the Westland affair. He said Mrs. Thatcher had tried to stop any discussion about the rescue plans. She expressed her regret at his going. The new man at Defence is Mr. George Younger. Good night.